on November 24th, 2009, at around 8 p.m., John Edward Jones, a devoted amateur cave diver from Utah who lives south of Salt Lake City, entered the Nutty Putty Caves. That was right before Thanksgiving, so he was accompanied by lots of family and friends. The journey was meant to be a quick excursion that they could enjoy together before the getaway. What it ultimately became was a death sentence for John Edward Jones. For the detailed story about the spelunking tragedy of Nutty Putty Cave, stay tuned and watch the video until the very end. For more interesting videos like this, subscribe to our channel Adventure Uncovered. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to get notified whenever we post new videos, and without further ado, let's get into it. The brothers John and Josh decided to rediscover their love for caving on November 24th, 2009. They chose Nutty Putty Cave as their next adventure. They arrived at the cave site at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, a few days before Thanksgiving. By caving standards, it was a sizable group that ultimately entered the Nutty Putty Cave since they weren't alone. 9 additional friends and acquaintances had joined them. For over an hour, everything went without a hitch. The Great Slide, the cave's largest room, had been explored by the group. As time went on, John, Josh, and 2 other friends decided to attempt a challenge they'd heard about traversing the birth canal, a difficult corridor that finally leads to a larger room. The first to move was John, who wriggled ahead for a while but failed to notice any wider area. He moved a little bit more, but the tight space didn't widen. Instead, it took a sudden downward curve. John moved away with assurance, possibly realizing the tunnel grew larger at the bottom. But it was already too late. The problem started 50 feet earlier. According to contradictory online reports, it's uncertain if John entered the birth canal, turned unintentionally, and wriggled into the Scout Eater, or if he missed it totally and entered Ed's Push, a corridor right next to the birth canal. Now, Ed's Push doesn't lead to a room with more space. It doesn't lead anywhere, at least not anywhere a man who is 6 feet and 200 pounds could fit. At the end of Ed's Push are 4 undiscovered passageways, although none of them are big enough for a person. Whatever the case, John persisted until he was unable to do so any longer. In addition, he was unable to turn back on his own because he had wriggled into a crevice that virtually descended straight down. He was squeezed into a space that was only 10 by 18 inches wide. Except for the fact that it wasn't a complete circle and he was confined to the narrowest area of the entrance, this size is comparable to the opening of a front-loading washing machine. All John could do while he was trapped for more than 100 feet underground in the depths of the cave was wait and pray. The first person to locate John was Josh, who was pursuing him. Josh attempted to pull John out of the rock, but he was only able to raise him a small amount due to his fear of how far that boulder had sucked John in. He immediately slid back into the fissure after letting John go. With one hand pinned beneath him and the other hand pushed backwards, John was stuck. Despite the fact that his feet and ankles were free, he was being forced downward by gravity. Josh went back to the ground as quickly as he could after they both said a quick prayer, slowly wriggling out of the narrow space and bursting to the surface. When the companion stayed with John outside, he promptly made a call for assistance. A local rescue volunteer named Susan was the first person to arrive to offer assistance. She instantly stopped what she was doing after hearing about the situation on her rescue pager and sped to the location in her Toyota. It had been more than 3 hours since John had been stranded in the cave when she finally arrived at midnight. Susan quickly and easily got to John due to her small size and agility. Some hours later, hundreds of rescuers showed up. The rescue crew immediately came up with one strategy after another, before they decided to use a rescue rope that goes through a series of climbing cams with one end tied around John's leg and the other end pulled by the crew. They reviewed everything, even lubricating the cave walls. They also attempted to drill away chunks of rock close to John at the same time. But the difficult terrain and uncomfortable positioning made drilling a tedious and painful process. They only succeeded in drilling through a few inches of rock in more than an hour. Before we move on, for more interesting content like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever a new video is posted. Further complicating matters was John's body position. Only his feet could be seen by the rescuers because he was virtually upside down, and because the roof above them hung so low, they couldn't merely pull him out because his feet would get in the way. Rescuers spent some time working frantically and failing with their initial climbing cam system. After that, they attempted to employ a rope pulley system, securing the pulleys with bolts and driving the bolts deep into the cave walls. The cave was narrow, making everything more challenging. No one could directly approach John despite the presence of a sizable team of rescuers, volunteers, emergency services, and a rescue aircraft outside. John was becoming worse at this point, since he had been hanging upside down for a while. He was having some trouble breathing, and his heart was working twice as hard to fight gravity and force the continuous blood flow out of his head. He was vacillating between panic and composure. They eventually managed to drop a two-way cable radio to him so that he could communicate with his wife, who was standing close to the cave entrance on the surface. Both of them were upset, but they gave each other comfort. John had already spent 19 hours upside down in captivity. As the rescuers eventually finished setting up their pulley system and began bringing John out, everything changed. They tugged together as a tandem of 8 guys. They frequently took breaks since John was sometimes in excruciating discomfort. But with each tug, they were able to lift John just a little higher. John was finally carried high enough to make eye contact with the rescuer nearest to him, being pulled upward from the 3rd time. He had a dirty face, red eyes, and a fatigued appearance, but otherwise, he seemed okay. The rescuer observed that John was grinning despite his complaints. After taking another pause, they decided to keep lifting John. He was on the verge of leaving. Something happened when John was raised for the 4th time by the rescue team. The rope suddenly became loose in their hand and the whole team toppled backwards. The nearest rescuer briefly lost consciousness after feeling a severe blow to the face. When he regained consciousness, all he could see was dust. The stone arch where the rope was tied around John's leg had fractured, and the closest key bolt had broken off. In the dust, he couldn't tell exactly where John was, but he soon understood that John had fallen directly down the crevice once more, this time appearing to be even deeper than previously. The rescuer had decided to switch roles with his dad, who was also on the rescue team, because he had significant facial injuries from the impact with a metal carabiner and was unable to continue performing rescue operations. When he got to John, he noticed that the man was fighting for his life and that his breathing was more shallow and less frequent. John did not answer when the rescuer shouted for him. In a last-ditch effort to tie the rope around John's waist, he attempted to descend into the crevice himself, but became trapped. It took him a while to get free, but once he did, he bored a new hole for the pulley and crawled out of the cave, tired, only to be replaced by another rescuer who got to John, but couldn't get in touch with him. A few minutes later, a doctor entered the cave and found John. On November 25th, at midnight, John was declared dead. He was 26 at the time. A total of 137 rescuers put in a heroic 27-hour effort to save John, but they were forced to leave the heartbreaking scene with no supplies and broken hearts. One of them told reporters that in his 29 years as a volunteer search and rescuer, this was the hardest rescue he had ever attempted. Nutty Putty Cave will always serve as John Edward Jones's ultimate resting place because authorities decided the next day that removing his remains from the cave would be too difficult and risky. The public was permanently barred from Nutty Putty Cave a week later by government officials. After that, it was sealed. A plaque honoring John was installed on the cave's entrance by his family. That was the tragic tale of John Edward Jones. And And that was all for today's video. If you liked the video, please give us a big thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to receive notifications, and feel free to express your valuable thoughts in the comment section below. If you wish to, feel free to spend some other time watching other videos on our channel for more epic and exciting adventure content. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.